All right.
All
Well,
right. Thank you
everyone
for
who
everyone
showed up
who
today.
showed up today.
Accessibility has been a passion of mine for
Passion
a
of
very
mine
long
for a
time,
very
and
long time,
I'm
and
always excited
I'm always
to
excited to
a
when I get
chance
a
to speak
chance
about
to
it.
speak
And
about it. And
accessibility testing has been an extra
an
nerdy thing
extra
for me
nerdy thing
as of
for me
late.
as of late.
So I'm very
So I'm
excited
very
to
excited
have a chance to
to
talk
have a
about it.
chance to talk about it.
But testing
Testing
isn't always the
isn't
hip and
always
cool
the hip and
thing.
cool thing.
It's not like
It's not like
the fun React thing
React
or
thing or
GraphQL, the thing that
the
everyone's
thing that
working on.
everyone's
But
working on. But
it's always there,
it's
and
always
we always
there,
have to
and
do
we
it,
always have to
and it
do it, and
spans
it
all
spans
levels of our
all
work,
levels of our work,
from design
from
to
design
development.
to development.
In my opinion,
In my opinion,
we have lots of
we have
different
lots
types
of different
of
types
testing. We
of
have
testing.
visual
We have
regression
visual
testing,
regression testing,
functional testing,
functional
unit
testing,
testing,
unit testing,
even code
even
reviews, I
code
believe, are a
reviews, I
form of
believe, are a form
testing.
of testing.
Design
Collaboration,
reviews,
design
checking
reviews,
wireframes,
checking
all these
wireframes,
things
all these
break
things
down to
break
spell
down to
checking
spell
and tools
checking
like
and tools
Grammarly.
like
We're always
Grammarly.
being
We're always being
with
inundated
these tests.
with these
But
tests.
what is
But what
end-to-end
is
testing?
end-to-end testing?
When you think of end-to-end testing, or at least when I first started thinking of it, it was more directly E2E testing. And I came across it when I was building out an Angular application, and they were using it to test out colors in the design system. But for this talk, I kind of wanted to focus on more of a full spectrum of testing, from what we do in the very beginning to what we do all the way at the end. And we'll hit kind of a lot of different points, and then kind of stumble upon some things that I discovered in my journey into nerding out about testing. What all this kind of comes down to is there's a lot of different types, and what are the benefits of each, and then how far do you want to take it? Not everything calls for a unit test. Not everything calls for a visual regression test. How much code coverage do you want to have? Do you need to have 100% coverage? Probably not. So it's really looking at each individual type of testing and saying, what are the benefits for my project or my product, and how far do I want to go with it? We use visual regression testing a lot at 10up, and do you need 100% of your templates and pages covered? Probably not, but you can get away with a subset of it. And that's kind of what you find in the balance. So what we're going to go through is why is testing so important? Who does accessibility testing help? What are the types of testing that I've come across? And then how do we scale this to larger instances? It's easy to do it for one individual project, but if you're at a university or a big company, you want to distribute components or design systems, there's a much more difficult challenge to take place. And I'm not just promoting automated testing at all. I think, take a pretty even look at all types of testing, both manual and automated. Excuse me. And we'll see what comes out of it. So why is accessibility testing so important? I think it's generally a good part of just quality assurance. People make errors, people make mistakes, people forget stuff. There's gaps in knowledge. That's why we have QA in place, and that's why we need to have QA specifically for accessibility. Defending some of this stuff gets a little bit difficult depending on who you're talking to, and I've been in the, I guess, fortunate position for 15 or 16 years now of talking about accessibility a lot. So I've kind of developed a bit of a framework when I'm talking to somebody on how to, for lack of a better phrase, sell the benefits of accessibility testing to people. First and foremost, taking the altruistic approach to it of open access. I think when we build stuff, anyone who wants to access information at any point should have the opportunity to do so. We shouldn't be putting up barriers for them. So whether that's a tweet, a Facebook post, your email, an article, something on Wikipedia, anything you want to access, you should be able to access it. And that's kind of the core of what we're doing with accessibility. We're pulling down these barriers to get information out to people. And with the testing, we're just making sure that it's getting out there. If that defense doesn't quite work, we fall back on opening up market share. There's a lot of people with disabilities, and if you cut off that portion of the market, you're not going to get in there. And there's also better SEO if we're just following better practices, best practices in HTML, alt text, that's more money coming into a company, more traffic, more everything, more better. And if all else fails, we always kind of fall back on reduced risk of litigation, which, and as we step through, that's the one that always kind of opens up the eyes wide, like, oh, I didn't realize that I could actually get in trouble for this stuff. But the end goal is to make sure information is accessible to everybody. How you get there, how you convince people, it's kind of waxes and wanes with the people you're interacting with. But overall, the way that we talk about testing, it just encompasses all these things. So what is our goal? Our ultimate goal is to help the user. But the goal in what we're talking about today is helping users easier. Helping people is kind of hard sometimes, especially if you have knowledge gaps that you don't know about. And putting these systems of checks and balances in place, like QA, helps people make less mistakes in this and helps people help other people. So we try and make that process easier. There are knowledge gaps. People work too fast sometimes, and people make errors just because they're a human. Human error is somewhere around 4%. So you're just going to mess up 4% of the time because you have skin and you're a human. So we put checks in place to try and minimize that. And the ultimate goal of doing something like an automated test is not to replace humans, especially in accessibility. We just really can't. There's a lot of things that scanners can't do. There's a lot of tests that we can't write. There's a lot of subjectivity in the guidelines, but rather to augment portions of the system that can be automated, things that are repetitive and predictable, things like checking focus trappings, things that have specific rules where you can tell a machine specifically you need to do this. And anybody who's done code reviews with accessibility in mind, who said this needs an ARIA state or this needs an ARIA expanded state 20 times in a week, can kind of understand the value of teaching a program to say that instead of having a person say it. It saves time, especially when it's the same thing over and over again. And I've had this quote in my head for a long time, and it's by a friend of mine, Chris, who I used to work with at BU, and we were building a DNA analysis tool in Django at the time. I think he was doing something with cropping images, just proper cropping of images, and he said, if you can teach a robot to do it, you can teach a human to do it, you can teach a robot to do it. And while that's not 100% true all the time, but I do think the heart of it is if you can set a clear rule and communicate that rule very, very clearly, that is a situation where you could teach a system to do the same thing. And all we're really doing here is pulling barriers away so humans can focus on like making a better experience. And this is the same reason that I don't have to light a fire in my kitchen in the morning if I want to make toast. We found a better way to do it. We were able to make a machine, a toaster, that can heat up the toast and make the toast, heat up the bread and make the toast for you. So it's kind of the same thing. It's more of a natural evolution than trying to shoehorn something in. And we can, as humans, we can work on making the best toast instead of just heating it up. And it kind of reminds me of a time when I was working in Boston and we were doing a project for Massport.com, which is the Massachusetts Port Authority, and a portion of the project was to do accessibility testing. We had a partnership with Perkins School for the Blind, and we had blind and low vision users test the site. We knew it was going to be a disaster, but we brought it down there and we had them run through it. They flagged a lot of accessibility issues with the test, with the website. We went off, we fixed them, we brought them back, and we retested it. And what we saw was this amazing thing where, because we tested it and fixed the results directly, all of these barriers were removed. And the blind and low vision users were actually experiencing the exact same UX problems that a sighted user would encounter. And that's what I mean by we're just kind of using testing and we're pulling away these barriers so we can improve the UX. And moving on with the project, we were able to make it better. So with testing, we're really looking to help out two groups of people. Well, there's the users, which is primary, but really we're going to focus on the editorial team and the product team. And you might call these something else, but essentially editorial team is someone who is updating content, and product team is who's designing and building. If you look at the editorial team, what we've found, and what I've found in my product work, is that the most common accessibility problems that we see as a project matures is going to be in the editorial experience. Because as product team members, we build the site, we build the navigation, the Chrome, the footer, everything, and we do our best to make that accessible. But the content is most of the site, and it changes all the time. So we need to put in safeguards to help people who are doing this work, because they're not accessibility experts. They're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be experts in the content they're creating. So we take a two-pronged approach. We do education, which is our first line of defense, and then we install some inline guidance. So let's take a look at the first part of that, which is education. And anyone who's sat through any of the talks that I've given in the past knows that I always try to find a way to sneak education into all of my talks, because I think it's so important. And this really is our first line of defense in people wanting to do the right thing, because if they don't know what the right thing is, it's going to be very, very difficult or near impossible for them to do it. And the way that we do this is we're teaching people how to run their own mental tests when they're writing content. It's kind of a form of internal manual testing. So when we're teaching people, or teaching the editorial team, we're covering more common issues around editorial. They don't necessarily need to know everything about everything. They just need to know the things that are relevant to the content that they're putting in. So presentation versus structure. So they're choosing the right headings. They're not just putting a paragraph in there, bumping the font size up and setting it to bold. Understanding what that means. Proper heading structure, writing meaningful links so we don't get click here, read more. That sort of stuff. Writing meaningful alternative text, which is very important. How to deal with audio and video. These are things that the editorial teams really need to understand and know to make sure that the content that they're producing does not make the site fall out of compliance. It changes so much. And then we're leaving these artifacts behind. These are presentation materials, workshops, links, articles, anything that you can find for anyone who's going to be a new editor on the site, so they can go through and they can understand this stuff, and it creates this spider web of teaching. And we start to install these mental triggers when someone's entering content. So they'll be writing content and saying, oh, did I remember to add alternative text to that image? Because I know that I have to do that now. Should this be an H2 or an H3? These are sort of the mental triggers that we hope to install with these things, not to make accessibility experts out of people, but rather to just help them identify things that can help improve the experience. And even so, humans forget, they mess up, bad things happen all the time. So we have this extra step of inline guidance, which I think is a really cool thing that we've done. Basically, WordPress is, the editor at least, is a giant form. It's a bit mangled now. I guess it's a debatable form because of Gutenberg, but it's essentially inputs, checkboxes, radios, text areas, and buttons. And we can add validation against the content output of those form elements. And that's what we did. We built a pre-flight accessibility checker plugin that hooks into the admin experience. And what happens is you'll be writing your content. You can run an accessibility scan. Down at the bottom, there's a Scan Now button. And it'll take the preview of the page. It submits it to a node server, runs Pally over the content, returns the results. And you can see where your accessibility errors might be based on these results before it goes out to publish. So when we combine that with education, we can really try to prevent and reduce these editorial issues. And you might say, well, why don't I just use the plugin? Well, the combination of the plugin and the education gives some context to these issues. If you see something that's this heading should be an H3 instead of an H5 or whatever, if you see it there, you're going to change it. But unless you understand why that error is happening, it's going to continue to happen. So we kind of do that, and it gives them the why of the errors. So this is our first kind of form of checking. And inside of this plugin, you could, in theory, block publishing until all these checkboxes are green, or all these icons are green. We usually don't do that because it can return some false positives. But just having this in place lets people know that either there's nothing that the scanner is checking. It's not to say there are no issues, but there's nothing that the scanner is checking at least. So it can be our front line of defense. The problem with this is that it's only the content. We're not testing the UI here. The UI is a little bit different because that involves the product team. And this is where our more traditional types of testing that we think of happens. Everybody wants to do this stuff correctly. We deal with testing, collaboration, and then we share these solutions throughout the product team so we can keep doing this sort of thing. So I did want to run through some common types of testing that I've come across, things that we've done at 10up. We have basic automated testing. We have advanced automated testing, which is the really cool thing that I have really been nerding out about. Manual testing, which is always going to be present. And then there's design and development collaboration in there as well, which is more of a conversational sort of checks and balances. So let's run through them. Basic testing. So basic testing, you're going to have manual basic testing and automated basic testing. Manual testing is going to be things like testing on screen readers, user tests, browser tests, inspecting HTML, code reviews, keyboard tests. And by keyboard test, I mean you just using something without a mouse and making sure that the interface is usable. For basic automated testing, you're going to have things like any of your scanners, SiteImprove, Lighthouse, Pally, which is my personal favorite that I use, Axe, and even linting. JSX Alley is a really good linting plugin for React that we use. It can actually run through the markup or the JSX markup for you. But linting in general can be really good to help this sort of thing. And that 10up, this is kind of how our linting came in place. We have our own JavaScript and CSS linting, and we kind of ask ourselves what can be automated and then what should be automated. And the way we did it, there's a lot of basic stuff that is in just kind of generalized best practice in ESLint file or a stylelint file. But beyond those basic things, we kind of looked at the content of the code reviews that we were getting and what were the more common things that we saw that we could automate, things like using color variables, instances of let and const, indentation, nesting, tabs versus spaces, that sort of thing. And all those things really can be automated. There's nothing to say that as a human, I need to be there and I need to say, use a color variable or something like that. Our automated processes can do that. It doesn't negate that you still need to do code reviews for better structure, any sort of high-level accessibility stuff. You still need them in there, but you can take those things that can be automated out and then kind of set them aside so you don't have to spend the time doing those things that a machine can do. You don't have to light the fire to make your toast. You can use the toaster. As far as automation, this is my automation of choice. It's HTML code sniffer. It's just a bookmarklet, but if you use, I know a lot of people like Lighthouse and Axe as well, which are all fine tools. It's just a bookmark that I use. It runs on Pally. It offers WCAG guidelines for each error, which I really like. It'll actually tell you which guideline you're violating. It's really, really good for colors, general HTML scanning, sort of snapshots of what is going on right now on the page, things like duplicate IDs, alts, alt text. Really, really good at finding that stuff. not good at interactivity, responsive behavior is anything subjective because it's just a scanner. It's not going to catch everything. And anyone who's been really deep into the world of accessibility testing knows that you're probably not going to find a scanner that's going to get anywhere near 100% 100% return errors for you. But that's not to say there's not value, and I think there's a lot of value in this stuff. You can scan it, get a quick look at things, and then look through all the errors individually, look through the warnings, look through the notices, and see what's kind of going on with it. A pro for this is it's very quick. It's a single click, maybe 10 minutes of looking through the report, pulling out what's valid, what's not valid. Cons of this: false positives do happen. It's just a scan tool, so it's only as smart as you make it, as smart as it can be. It can't detect everything, and it doesn't really scale because you got to click a button. You can run it in CI if you want to, but mostly this sort of thing, it's not gonna be like that. We also have manual testing, and this is an example of the manual testing spreadsheet that we use at 10up. It has all of the guidelines, links to descriptions, pass, fail, compliance level, all that stuff. Really, really good at doing keyboard tests, clicking around, HTML inspection, anything you find in screen readers, stuff like that. A good thing about this, it's very thorough. It's all going to be valid. A con, it takes forever. Not forever, but it takes a long time to do. It's probably 30 minutes to an hour per template that you want to scan. And then there's one, if you can see all the way over to the left, there's one for global elements, things like header, footer, any components that appear frequently throughout the site. We do that in a separate tab, so they don't appear on the, like if there's something wrong with the navigation, it's not going to appear on every single tab, so we don't have it listed in there 100 times. And then these will get transferred into some sort of a bug tracking software. But ultimately, you're going to find a balance of manual and automated testing that's best for your product. And it's a hard thing. It takes a lot of time and effort. But we can also take the parts of this manual test and see what's repeatable, what happens a lot, and what can be automated. Kind of like what we did when we built out the linting rules. And that's where we get into the real nitty-gritty stuff of functional testing. So when we're doing functional testing, and this is automated functional testing, we're going to ask ourselves 3 questions. Are the things that we do manual, are there things we do manually that are repeatable enough to automate? Can I ask a specific question? And will the technology allow for it? So we need to figure out, are there things that we can automate? Are the questions straightforward enough to where a machine can be like, yes or no for this? And is there a technology that will allow me to do this thing? So when I started down this path, it was on that Angular project that I mentioned earlier, and we were building out it was a design system, and we were building out tabs, and we were writing the E2E tests for tabs. And I thought, well, why don't we put a bunch of accessibility tests in here? Because we can do this. We're opening up a web browser, essentially clicking through it, and let's see if we can do it. And it worked. So basically what we need to do these tests is a web browser and a tester, and something that's pretending that it's me and clicking around. And the technologies that I landed on for that are Puppeteer and Jest. Puppeteer is a Node library that provides a high-level API to control Chromium in this case. And Jest is just a JavaScript testing framework. Anyone who's had experience with React is often paired with React. But you can use any assertion library. Jest is really used to run the tests and then check the results. But it's really good for hardline compliance testing. If you have very specific rules for components that you need to test against, anything with the yes/no response, checking for ARIA states and roles. You can even watch a video in the browser and then check for anything that might cause a seizure in that video. So anything that you can sit down and have a human do with a yes or no answer, you can do with these tests. Basically asking specifically objective questions. So things like, do all the correct ARIA roles exist? You can check the HTML for the existence of landmark roles, widgets, composite, document structure, live regions, window roles. Some of these will be applicable to your applications or products, some of them won't be, but you can check for the presence of them when they're needed. Are the keyboard bindings in this accordion correct? You can check for all that stuff. What happens when I hit tab? What happens when I open a panel? What happens when I close a panel? What happens when I use the arrow keys? Are all the expanded states correct? Does focus move properly through this component? These are all things that you can have a yes or no response to, so you can wire them up to a component. Can I navigate this UI without a mouse? Do all my tabs work to spec? Do all my submenus open and close correctly? Can I access my submenus at all? Can I tab from the top to the bottom of this page without being trapped? Does this video have keyboard accessible controls? Is focus always visible? These are all very straightforward yes or no questions that you can, for the most part, you can check for. Is focus properly trapped in this dialog? Does it return focus correctly when it's closed? So any sorts of questions like these, you can ask the system, and this is the output of one of the tests that we wrote for an accordion. You can see that it opens and closes with the keyboard, it opens and closes without a mouse, and all the panels are accessed, so we know that it's working to spec. And if you can ask a specific question, you can get a specific answer. What's really cool about these tests is that you can test them over and over on throughout the life cycle of a project. It doesn't have to be just, I'm writing this, I'm going to run it, see, and then that's it. You can run these in the CI pipeline to see if some code got pushed that broke the accessibility test. It can just happen. You can even run them on third-party code if they're general enough, and maybe change a little bit, but most of these things are just compliance issues. So if you're pulling in a third-party modal, for instance, or accordion, you can hook this test up to it, and it'll tell you if it's working to spec or not. So you don't have to sit there and review it all the time. Or if you have an environment where people can kind of bring their own plugins in, their own UI stuff, you can still run these tests and say, like, no, I'm sorry, this plugin doesn't meet our accessibility compliance. So it's really, really good for the keyboard accessibility and ARIA state roles. It's really good for compliance, but you still need screen reader and human testing to improve the UX. And these tests aren't 100% foolproof. You're not going to be able to catch everything with them. There's stuff like, does this YouTube video have captions? I haven't tried to test that, but I think you probably have trouble testing that one. If audio descriptions are present, that would be another one that would be really difficult. Anything that's subjective, meaningful sequence, motion actuation, reading level, all very, very complicated rules to test. So you still need a human to test those sorts of things, but that's not to say that there are some things that we can offload to these more custom automated tests. So the question after that is, how do I scale this? So this is all great. You have your inline guidance and training. You have your light general automation with Lighthouse or Axe or Pally. You have compliance in your functional testing where we can define the rules. You have manual testing for everything else for one website. And then you're exhausted and you don't feel like doing this anymore. Scaling the stuff is challenging, but you can scale it up to a larger organization and distribute these things. So we're asking, how can we scale this? You have editorial tests looking after your content. You have functional tests looking after the UI. And even with all this stuff in place, people can still mess up. They want their work to be accessible. If you give them a way to easily do it, they will use it. And what we've done is pre-build components and design system elements and distribute them using NPM. And then those components are all paired with accessibility tests. And we've done this at 10up in our component library called Baseline. This is Baseline. It's at baseline.10up.com. It's filled with NPM packages that we use on our projects. Anybody can use them. They're all shipped with accessibility tests. So we can take these and distribute them to other projects, and we can run through if we want to fix something, and then we can fix the package and deploy it, and it'll all be fixed up. We can run the accessibility tests against other websites. So it's kind of mimicking, the way we do it is more project to project, but it's the same sort of pattern if you wanted to do this for a distributed design system or distributed component library across a larger organization. You're going to distribute these components, package it up with an accessibility test, and then whenever something deploys, you can run the accessibility test, make sure it's okay, and make sure that things are working how they should be. What I think is really neat about Baseline is that we've kind of different components in it. It's very project-based, so if we run into something that we think is a challenge on a project, it'll be abstracted into Baseline to be reused or rebuilt or something to be installed into this medium. So we have things like countdown timers in there and scrolling indicators, and we have some more traditional ones as well, but all paired with accessibility tests. So if we want to look into one of them, we have this is our animation library, which is a collection of classes, CSS classes. And the accessibility test that's run here is to make sure that all of the classes that are available support reduced motion. So with Puppeteer and Jest, we're spinning up a headless version of Chrome, triggering reduced motion, media query, and running through all of these animations in a demo. So it's a little demo that appears on the site, and change the animations, apply them, and it does it over and over again until it tests all of them. And we can make sure that if anyone ever pushes a new animation to this, it'll run. If it's not hooked up right, if it's not supporting reduced motion, the test will fail, and you'll have to go back and fix it. But these tests can be run pre-commit, pre-merge, pre-deploy, after site integration, and we don't have to worry about certain components. If we're using this thing, we know that all these animations are going to support that. We know that the accordion is going to pass compliance. Not to say that the individual design implementation is going to pass, but we can say that at least we came with a good starting point. And this stuff even works with design systems. You can check if your branding colors are being used correctly, your font usage, is a site misusing branding? Are they using a weird typeface, or the font's too small? There's a lot of stuff that we could do with these automated tests that are just beyond the scope of what is reasonable to ask a human to do. If you have an organization with 200, 300 websites, it's not really reasonable to have somebody go through and click through all these sites and spot check to see if all the branding colors or the font sizes are correct. But what I think is really important to remember is, we're not necessarily striving for or guaranteeing 100% anything. It's kind of like security. You can have the best security protocols applied to an organization, and you can still get hacked. And it's the same thing with accessibility. You can have all these checks in place, and you can still find some things in there that don't quite work for accessibility. So striving for 100% on that is great, but it's also extremely difficult. And all these things that we talked about are just steps to help people access information. That's all it is. It's testing, education, scaling, making sure that everybody who wants that information can get that information regardless of where they are, who they are, any disability that they have. And that's what's really important. But as you remember to keep moving forward with this stuff, keep pushing hard, but give yourself a break. I think it'll be okay. It's a lot. It's a big responsibility. I feel like it's a big responsibility. It's information access. It's very oftentimes access to truth. And it's really important to get out there, but take it one step at a time. There's a lot of steps in the process. You don't have to make one giant leap to the end. And if you remember why you're doing it in the first place, doing it to help people and help people have understanding and access to this information, I think you'll come to the same conclusion that I came to, that it is worth all the effort and time that's put into it in the end. That's all I have. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me, tim@10up.com, or I am Tim Wright on Twitter.